Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. It's been a little while since I've uploaded one just because of work getting in the way and start of a new year. So I thought we'd cover something that's been a bit of a topic in the Discord lately, which is blueprint interfaces and how we can actually use those in replace of cast nodes and how they can actually be used to send information between blueprints and between actors, and how they can actually be used to send information between different blueprints without having to cast to them. So what we're going to do in this one is we're going to set up a little puzzle game. So you've got to get the colors to be in the correct combination, and then I'll activate something. So to start off with, I'm using the VR template. Blueprint interface is a general code use. So it actually works with any type of project, and it'll just be something that you implement based on the system that you need and how you want it set up. And in this case, the first thing I need to do is actually set up a line trace on our motion controller so we can actually interact with some different blueprints. So I'm going to do that by going to motion controller. I'm going to do this through the right hand, so I'm going to get the right controller, get, and I'm going to do a line trace by channel. What I'm going to do is actually create a new input, edit project settings, input, action mappings. Let's call this right trigger, because that's where we're going to set it from. So in this case, I'm using the Oculus Quest, so I need the Oculus Touch controls, and then right trigger. Excellent. So now, if we go back in here, we can do compile just so it updates. Event, right, and then if we go up, we should have right trigger. Excellent. So we're going to fire the line trace on this input because we don't really need it to go on tick. There's no point. It's just a bit of performance thing. So we're going to get our controller, going to get world location. And we'll do this from the motion controller itself, and we'll get forward vector. We might need to rotate this in a minute. We then need to multiply, so shift star, by a float. So this will be how far our line trace actually extends from our controller. And we're going to add this to our world location. So we'll do a vector, we'll plug these in, and this one's going to go into our end, and then the return from our get world location is going to plug straight into our start. So now if we add this to, let's say 1000, and we'll set visibility or draw debug type for duration. So once we press the trigger, and now if we test, we can jump in. And now if we actually point somewhere, we have a line trace from our right controller that we can use to interact with the scene and control our blueprints. So what I'm going to do is set the duration for 1 frame, just so it's not constantly in the way. And the next thing we need to do is create a blueprint or an actor which actually has an interface in it. So I'm just going to right click, I'm going to blueprint class, I'm going to go to actor, BP for blueprint underscore, and we'll call this button. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in here, we're simply going to add a cube. So with our actor created, we can actually drag it into the scene. And what we need to do now is actually create our interface so we can actually interact with it. So I'm going to right click, going to go to blueprints, blueprint interface, and we'll call this BPI underscore interactable. We'll hit enter. And now what we need to do is actually open this up, and you'll see now it gives us the option to create a function. The best way to think of this is more like an event which carries information between them. That's how I find it easier to understand. So think of this as a custom event that we're going to name. So I'm going to call it interact. So I'm going to call it interact. I'm going to hit enter. And now I'm going to hit compile and save. And what we can do now in our button is actually go to class settings and implement interface. So we can go to add, and we know it's called BPI interactable. So you can see it here in the list. We can also search for it and then select it. The thing is now, if we right click and we try and look for this function, it won't appear. So we need to hit compile, and now we can do it. So we created a new function. And as I mentioned, think of it as an event. So we're going to search event interact. And you can see it shows up here. And what we need to do now is actually tell our line trace to fire this node. And that just needs a reference. So we're going to go back to our, actually what we'll do is while we're here, we'll do a print string. So we can see that we're actually hitting it. So it'll say hello. And in our motion controller, we're going to go back to our line trace. We're going to search break hit result from our hit. And we're going to get our hit actor and we go and we can search for interface. And you'll see we have an option for does implement interface. If it does, we're going to branch that. So we're checking to see if we have our interface, and the interface we're looking for is BPI interactable. We're then going to get the hit actor and I'm going to search for interact. And you see here we get an interact message. So we're sending a message from this blueprint to our new one. And we're going to do that and plug that into true. So if our hit actor has our interface, it's going to go through and it'll fire it. And because the hit actor is the one that we're after, it'll send that information to it. So we hit play and save. We should now be able to actually point at and fire our hello print string, which is exactly what we're after. And to see this a little bit better, we can go to our button. We'll remove that and we'll do a flip-flop. And I'm just going to do this to change the cube's material. Set material. And we're going to do this for both times. So the first one will be the material that's next in the list. So we'll make this a green. And then we'll set it back to basic shape material. So in the second one, it's going to be basic shape material. Because the first time this fires, it's going to go through A, which will change it to another color. And in this case, I'm just going to use the green. And in the second, it'll fire back to the original. So we jump in now. We can point at it, and you'll see our line trace is going, and we're changing back and forth. But in this case, we're not actually sending any information. So what if we want to open a door or make a password or a code of some sort? So now, what if we want this cube, once we interact with it, to change the color of a couple of other cubes? So what we'll do is we're going to right click. Actually, we'll duplicate our cube. We'll call this BP underscore color. It can be anything you want, so name it as what you need, but we're going to change the color of this cube. And you see it's already got that set up, so we just need the interact. And what I'm going to do is actually in the first one, so I'm going to remove this. We're going to keep that flip-flop because we're going to use it in a second. And in our color, we're going to delete our function. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create a new interface. So in our interface, we're going to do activate. We'll hit enter, compile and save. Now in our color, so the second one that we created, we're going to search for activate. And we want the event, so we want to make sure it's event activate. So we plug this in. Now this will change the color, and our original cube will stay the same. We could test this, but nothing's going to happen. One, we haven't got our color cube in the scene. So let's move that around, and we're going to duplicate a couple of these. And what we need to do is actually tell this actor to talk to these 4 cubes. Now let's make 5. We'll keep it a decent number. And what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate a couple of these. Hopefully you're keeping track. Just going to make a little combination lock. And we'll do 5 as well. So we've got 5 buttons and 5 color combinations. What we'll do is we will open up our blueprint button. Now I'm going to actually create an array of actors. So I'm going to call this actor. And we're going to search for actor in our variable type. We'll do actor references. And we're going to set this one to an array because I want to select multiple objects. Hit compile, set to variable or public variable so we can see it. Hit compile, save, and drag this into our scene. We'll do get, do for each, and we'll plug that in. We'll actually get rid of our flip-flop. We'll plug that in because we're going to fire a flip-flop in the other material. And then we can do array, and we can actually look for our new activate. So you got to remember that this is the message. So we're basically getting a reference to the actors in our scene. We're looking for the message for activate. And we're going to fire this. So hit compile and save. Now, in our blueprint color, we've got activate. So now this will actually fire. So we can select these. So our buttons, one for each cube. And we can select in our array element a number of these cubes to activate. And I'm going to select this middle one just as a reference. And I'm going to select a cube that we already have and one that we don't. And now if we jump in, you see that we can actually point at the first cube and it'll activate 3 of them. Second one won't do anything. If we've done the first one again, it'll actually turn them all off. So we select the first one, turn them on. In the middle one, if you remember, we actually selected a couple of these to turn off. So we select it again and it deactivates one and activates the other because of the organization of the flip-flop. So we can go back and forth and we can actually create a combination lock to turn off and do specific things. So I'm going to take a second. I'm going to set this up as a fun little combination lock. And once we get all the colors green, we'll move on to the next step. So I've set this up so I can go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it'll light them all up in a specific order. So if we jump in, we do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then so we get all green. And then what you would normally do is you could mix these cubes up and put them in different locations, and then it would do a different pattern. You'd have to remember the combination in the sequence. But for now, we're just going to have these cubes activate something else with information. So we're actually going to create a third blueprint. So we'll do a blueprint class actor BP underscore, and in this case, it would probably be a door or a score or something along them lines, just something that activates. So I'm just going to call this underscore, let's do prize, underscore prize. We will go into our event graph and we're going to add a sphere this time just so we can see which one it is. Hit compile. I'm going to drag this in and I'm going to remove the default nodes because we're going to use a custom input. And for this one, I'm actually going to do a change material again, set material. I'm going to set this one to green when we win. And then it'll be back to default when we lose, which is basic shape material. So when the combination is not correct, it's going to go through and it's going to choose which one we want. But first, we need our actual function. So we're going to do win. Yeah, we'll call this win, just so you guys can see and understand it. And what we're going to do actually is we're going to create an input. And this input is going to carry some information for us. And in this case, it's going to be an integer. And we're going to call this, doesn't really matter what we call it, so I'm just going to call this number because we're going to count up to 5 because that's how many squares we've got. And in our blueprint prize, we're just going to get our win. So class settings, we need to add our interface, which is interactable. We're going to compile so we can actually access it in our menu. Event win, and you'll see that it's actually got our input for numbers. We don't have any numbers coming in, but we do need to do an equal to, or we do need to do an equal to 5. So this is going to be the input for the amount of boxes that are in our scene. So we'll promote this to a variable. And we'll call this input. Might as well. And then we'll do a branch, do an event, branch. If it's true, it's going to set our material to the green material that we're using. If not, it's going to stay at gray. So we'll hit compile and save. And now in our colored cubes, we need to actually add information to that event. So if our material is green, so if our material turns green, we're going to get our win message, and we're going to +1 to this. So and the first thing we need to do is actually get a reference to our new prize blueprint. So I'm going to hit the plus. I call this prize actor. Hit compile. And we'll set this to actor object reference and then hit compile. This is just so we can actually select in the scene what our actor is going to be. So we've got our prize, so we can drag that in, and then we can select on each one of these to communicate with that blueprint. So I'm going to set this all up. And now back in our prize, we can get an input. So now in our color, we can do prize, get actor, and we can search for win message. That's getting our reference. If it's green, we're going to add 1 to the value. And if it's not, we're actually going to subtract 1. Then we can hit compile and save. If we go to prize, we need to do some math. I realized before this. What we're going to do is we're going to set, what I've done is I've disconnected the little math that we did before. I'm actually going to create a variable, and I'm going to call this value. And I'm going to make sure this is an integer. I'm going to drag this into the scene. So what we're going to do is we've dragged in our value. We're then going to set our value, and we're going to add our input to the value. So we'll do a plus, integer, plus, and then we set. What you'll see now is every time one of these colors is fired, it adds to our value in here. So if I do a print string, we should see the print string match the number of green cubes in the scene. So we can do plus. So if I do 1, you see that the first button fires 3 cubes. So we get 3 in the value. And then 3 again. And then 2, 3, and then finally 5. So what we can do now is we can drag off this. We can do equal again, and we'll have our amount. So this is the amount needed to activate this little piece of code. So now when our value is 5 and our combination has been completed, we should, in theory, change the color of our sphere. So we go through, try different combinations. We guess one right, so it turned green. Now if I disable it, it goes back. And you can see that we can actually do a variety of different things to get our object to change color. So we're not displaying any information in this scene apart from the color changing, but we are sending values between different blueprints easily without having to use a cast node. So this was a bit of a long one and a complex one, so I hope I explained this right, and especially give you an idea of how you can use these casts in your own project. If you do want access to this file, I'll package this up and I'll put it on the Patreon, which will be available for download as soon as this video goes up. So you saw that we've got that working. The value of this now is we can actually reuse this code in different places. So let's say we wanted 3 of these boxes to do the same thing. We could simply drag these over and we could then point these to another sphere. I won't do it just because this tutorial is getting on quite a bit anyway. But you can see how just by changing these actors, it'll fire through it. So I recommend having a play around, seeing what you can come up with and what you can do. And I'd love to see what you come up with. If you do come up with anything cool or some cool puzzles or anything, I'd love to see them. Just head into the Discord. So you can see there's a link at the bottom and there's also one in the description. And it'd be awesome to see you over there. So until next time, stay safe and I'll see you then. Bye.